Hi, I'm nervous. Okay, I gotta take a survey. Raise your hand if you pooped the parasite out of your butt. Okay, good. Raise your hand if you blew one out of your nose. Oh, wow. Okay, good. And then raise your hand if you've ever lived or worked in a moldy building. Okay. All right, lots of people. All right, so all that is unlucky exposures, metals, chemicals, parasites, Lyme. That's unlucky exposure. And you can have a really good lifestyle with diet and exercise and still get really sick because of all that. And I tell my patients, because sometimes they ask the question, I eat the right foods and they're all about their foods and their exercise, but it's like you had an unlucky exposure. You got to take the supplements to fix that up, clean that out of your body. So that's what we're going to talk about. And so this is actually the very first official lecture on diet and nutrition in the history of CellCore. So welcome. Here we go. And I got to give you my diet history. So in 1999, I started a low carb diet because of the Weston A. Price Foundation. And I was very strict for 16 years, less than 75 grams of carbs a day. If I cheated, I was still less than 125 grams of carbs a day. And looking back, I know I was never in ketosis. In 2015, I started the keto diet, cycling in and out of ketosis, which I still do now. And in 2018, August, I started the carnivore diet. And my goal, and during this time, I'm detoxing mold, and that's not fun. But the carnivore diet created some stability in my body, which is fantastic. But that first year, I had this rule, eat as much meat as I possibly can every day. And I also was trying to gain weight. And I was going to the gym, I put on some muscle. This button right here is a little bit stressed out. And my pants were too tight, and all the girls were looking at me funny. So I was like, wait a minute, I need to get a new wardrobe, or I could lose some weight. So I switched my rule over to eat as much meat as I need or want for the day. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And I think that my carnivore diet is 95% calories from meat, 5% from other like plants. So I spoke twice to the USDA Dietary Guidelines Committee to convince them to only look at science for the 2020 food pyramid update. Every 5 years, the USDA has to update the food pyramid. And since 1980, they have not been looking at the science. So I failed in 2020, and they're already ramping up again for 2025. And they've already declared that they're not looking at the science. But what is science? Now, I started my YouTube career in 2013. The vegans found me in 2017. And they post, in YouTube, the comment section, like you can make a comment this long. And I read their comments and I clicked on their links for their studies and it took me a few years to figure out, like, what are they saying? Why are they saying it? Because it doesn't make sense, but they got these studies, quote unquote studies. So let's talk about what is science, especially in nutrition. So here we have levels of evidence. There's 7 levels. Levels 7, 6, 5, 4 are not science. Those are surveys. And then we have levels 3, 2, 1. Those are science. Okay. Here's another way to look at it. Different author, different graphic. At the bottom, we have editorials, expert opinions, case series, case reports, case controlled studies, cohort studies. That is not science. Those are not scientific endeavors. Why? Because there's no experiment. In order to have science, you have to have an experiment. What that means is you have 2 groups of people. And one group, you do something to them, and the other group is the control. So when you look at the word cohort study, that just means group. There's not 2 groups. There's one group. Then you got randomized control trials and then systemic review of randomized control trials at the very top. Those 2 things at the very top, that's science. And that's what you need to read, not non-science. All right, here's another graphic, different author, and same story. Now in this one, only the very top is science. Everything else below it is a survey. Basically, it's a fancy survey. Now on the left, it says studies reviewed by IARC. I threw this in there because that stands for the International Agency for Research on Cancer. And they're the ones that convinced the World Health Organization that meat is a class 2 carcinogen. And notice what they looked at. They looked at surveys. They didn't look at any science at all. And now everybody around the world thinks that meat is a class 2 carcinogen. Total fraud. Total fraud. Okay, so surveys are not science. There needs to be an experiment where you do something to a group of people to cross the threshold from survey to science. These survey studies are not science. Cohort, longitudinal, cross-sectional, case study, case series, case control, observational studies, epidemiology, exploratory epidemiology. Now, the people that run these surveys, they make a product. That product is called a hypothesis, which is an educated guess. You are not the customer for what they do. Their product is not to be put onto your plate, okay, because that's not science, okay? But these are science. Controlled clinical trial, randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, and systemic review of only controlled trials. There's only 3 things. And then that's what you're supposed to look at. Let me go back to this one. Now, these people that do the surveys, their customer, if you will, are these people, the scientists that have more money, more manpower, higher IQ, and bigger computers. These are the people that actually find fact. They have computers so big they can fill this room. Like, these are the people that you study from, okay? Not these people. And this is, well, I'm talking about the schools of public health. All the schools of public health around the country, there's 2 divisions of researchers there. 95% of them are creating educated guesses. And then those educated guesses go up the ladder to these people. Okay, so that's what science is. Okay, here's some examples of surveys. Blue Zones, China Study, EPIC Study, NHANES. NHANES is the federally funded survey. They've been doing this since the 70s. And they say, what do you eat and how's your health? There's no experiment there. There's no science there. The Okinawan studies, the Seventh-day Adventists, those are group studies. They're just taking surveys. And then here are some studies that are science. The Minnesota Coronary Study. Do you know about this study? This multi-clinics, like 5 clinics over 5 years, lots of patients, and most of them were in the clinics for an extended period of time. And the control group was people eating animal fats and protein and regular food. And then the experimental group, these people had vegetable oils, an increased amount of vegetable oils, and I believe a decrease in the animal fat. And the people that had the vegetable oils had higher mortality, higher cancer, higher heart attacks, and heart disease. That one study absolutely tells us don't eat vegetable oils. That was the only variable in that study. And the people that ran that study were ashamed, this is back in the 80s, because the narrative at the time was that plant oils are good, animal fats are bad. And it didn't turn out that way. And the author threw all the papers into a big box and he took it to his home in his attic and stored it in his attic for 17 years. It was never published until, I don't know, 12 years ago or so. So the Verta Health Study, this is in Indiana, 2 years ketogenic diet for diabetics. Fantastic study. It was an experiment. It's actually science. The Women's Health Initiative, the biggest funded study ever by our federal government. Have you heard about this one? This is where they find out that Premarin causes cancer. And they had to stop that part of that study immediately because women were getting cancer real quick. And then with the Women's Health Initiative, they also had a group of women they decreased their meat intake by 20% compared to a control group, and they followed them for years. And the women that decreased their meat did not have a 20% decrease in heart disease, cancer, any other disease. Okay, so low carb beats low fat 36-0. At the very bottom is that reference PHCUK, that stands for Public Health Collaboration UK. And they keep track. They're the ones that are the timekeepers, if you will, the referees in this battle between low fat versus low carb. Low carb beats low fat 36-0 in randomized controlled trials. And this is the type of information that the USDA Dietary Guidelines Committee completely ignores. There are 1,910 low carb clinical trials, all ignored by the USDA Dietary Guidelines Committee. And if you want to be a little bit of a political activist, you can hook up with this person, Nina Teicholz. She wrote this book, The Big Fat Surprise, and she kind of like helps us be in communication with the Dietary Guidelines Committee, and they will put out they'll look for feedback. So I'm always like looking out for email, and I respond to her requests to help change the USDA food pyramid, because that is the main problem. This grassroots, you could think, well, it's grassroots. Everybody needs their personal responsibility. Yeah, but the USDA is demanding that all the mess halls, all the school kitchens, the university professors, the dietitians, the nutritionists, the medical doctors, who all are licensed by the feds or whatever, they have to teach the food pyramid. All right, next one. Unethical diets experts often claim. So these are things you have to look out for. So back in 2017, when the vegans were trying to teach me that I was wrong, they would say things like, you need to look at the totality or preponderance of the science, as if all the science is equal. Look at all of it together equally. That is not what you should not do that at all. It's not all equal. Only 5% are actual science. And when you're on PubMed and you look for a nutrition study, you click on the upper left, you click clinical trial and randomized clinical trial, and it gets rid of all the garbage. Unethical diet experts may also claim eating 5 almonds a day makes you live 11 years longer. Have you ever heard of that before? That is not plausible. They come up with that because they take these surveys and they plug it into the answers into an Excel spreadsheet, and they do math. And they think they're doing science. And like, look, I'm gonna do math on Excel, boop, 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 like that. And it's like, you should eat almonds every day. They also may claim that a single nutritional chemical causes disease, such as TMAO, LDL, mTOR, there's a whole list. Not plausible. There's too many biochemical reactions and buffers in the body that there's not a single nutritional chemical that causes a disease. Harvard School of Public Health Diet Survey created by Dr. Walter Willett. They say it's valid, not valid. It's been disproven multiple times that when you give a person this multiple page questionnaire about what they're eating, people will oftentimes put in too little calories, which they would die if they actually ate that little. And the questions are, how many cups of spare ribs have you eaten in the last year? It's like ridiculous questions. It's a joke. The whole public school of public health, all that stuff, it's a total joke. You think Fauci is a joke? It's that. It's like that. Okay, the American Heart Association, American Medical Association, USDA, the American Dietetics Association say a plant-based diet is optimal. That's an appeal to authority. And can all those people be wrong? Can all those associations worldwide be wrong? Yes, 100%. They're all wrong, okay? 100%. And then sometimes somebody would say to me on my channel, you're just a chiropractor. Well, that's appeal to authority. It's the same argument. Okay, so let's talk about the scientific process. What is it? Science is not a paper. It's a series of steps. All the steps must be followed to completion. And I got 4 slides coming up on the graphic examples of the scientific process. So follow with me on the very top. It says observation. And that's step 1. You see something and you think, well, what's going on here? You ask a question, you come up with an educated guess. And then the next step says experiment. You analyze the data and then you make a conclusion. That's a pretty good representation of the scientific process, although they don't say publish the studies. Here's another one. At the very top, it says identify the problem, gather data. Then you come up with this educated guess, and then you test the hypothesis with an experiment. And then does the new data agree? Okay, this one they didn't publish your data. Okay, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. This is my favorite one. I actually got this from depositphotos.com. At the very bottom, it says ask a question, do background research, construct your hypothesis, and then test the hypothesis by doing an experiment. That is key. Analyze the data, draw a conclusion, report the results. You report the results so that other clinics or researchers can replicate your study and see if you did it right, if your conclusion was right. This one comes from Wikimedia, and there's no experiment in this one, but it's labeled scientific process, but there's no experiment. So this graphic is incorrect. Okay, you get the idea? There's got to be an experiment. Okay, but before I get into a little bit more about that, this is a guide to reading the survey studies. Okay, because 95% of nutrition studies are just surveys. How do you read them? Well, the first bullet point says RR is relative risk, OR is odds ratio, HR is hazard ratio. It's all about the number one. So you do all this, you do the surveys, you put on Excel, you do some fancy math, and then the number could be one, which means that the thing you're testing does not cause the condition that you're exploring. For example, you may think that chewing gum makes people fall down more. Okay, so you do a survey. Do you chew gum? How often do you fall down every 5 years? And you gather this data up, and then you do the math, and if it comes down to 1.0, that means that chewing gum does not cause, nor does it protect you from falling down. Okay, but if the number is below 1, that means that maybe chewing gum prevents you from falling down. And if the number is above 1, then maybe chewing gum causes you to fall down. Okay, that's how they come up with this. Now, it can't just be like 1.1 and you say, oh, chewing gum makes people fall down, or 1.2. No, it's got to be like 3.0 or 10.0. And even then, you can't say chewing gum makes you fall down. What you say is, let's send this to those really smart researchers with more money, more manpower, and those huge computers, and they will run an experiment, and that'll test our hypothesis. So that's how that goes. Now, cigarettes, relative risk was over 100. So that was pretty obvious, although an experiment was never conducted because that would be unethical. All right, so here's over 200 studies about all kinds of foods. Do these foods cause cancer or affect cancer in any way? And the answer, no. Because the relative risk is 0.998, it's basically 1. So eating these foods does not cause or prevent cancer. The next one, does protein intake affect cancer and heart disease? The answer is no. The relative risk for cancer is 0.98, and for heart disease is 0.99. That includes plant and animal protein. So somebody says eating animal protein causes cancer or heart disease, you know that they are incorrect. The bigger these studies, the bigger these surveys, the less of an effect it has that the thing you're testing has on the human body. Okay, does red meat cause cancer or heart disease? Clinical science, now we're talking clinical scientific experiments. And the answer is no. Red meat does not cause cancer or heart disease. And this title of the study says effect of lower versus higher red meat intake on cardiometabolic and cancer outcomes, a systemic review of randomized trials. This is the top pinnacle, best of the best of nutrition research. So my big statement for this past 15 minutes is that there are 0 scientific experiments that show meat causes any disease. Okay, you got that? 0. Meat does not cause any disease. It feels so good to say that. Oh my God. Okay, this is Georgia Eade. She's an MD, Harvard psychiatrist, and she worked at the student clinic. So picture a 19-year-old freshman at Harvard, overwhelmed, studying a lot, eating soy, low fat, lots of vegetables, and they're crying, they're depressed, they can't think straight. And they come to see Georgia. And she goes, what's your diet like? Oh, you need to eat red meat. Let's do the ketogenic diet. You're only 19. You need to have a high fat diet, moderate protein, low carb, because your brain's not fully developed until you're 25. So more on that in a bit. So Georgia here is talking about a search she did on PubMed called Vegetables and Health. She just put in the title in the search bar, Vegetables and Health. So let's play this.
Just as an experiment, I wanted to get a feel for what kinds of evidence is out there supporting vegetables and health. And so what I did was I went on PubMed, and which is a search engine for those of you who don't know, look for scientific articles. And there are over 80,000 studies about vegetables, so I obviously couldn't go through all of those. Narrowed them down to randomized controlled studies having to do with vegetables and health. And I use the word health because if anything, that might induce a positive bias. It's looking for evidence to support vegetables. And so unfortunately, most of these studies I had to eliminate from the consideration because most of them were irrelevant to the question. The vast majority of studies about vegetables were about how to get people to eat more of them, not about whether or not they were actually healthy. So, and of the studies that remained, 18 of them were negative. The investigators were looking for health benefits from vegetables and didn't find what they were hoping to see. And as you might notice here, another problem with vegetable studies is that the vast majority of vegetable studies are not studies of vegetables, they're studies of fruits and vegetables. And fruits and vegetables are very different from a plant point of view and from our point of view. They're just completely different creatures. So hard to say. So in the positive studies, I found 10 positive studies, but unfortunately none of them controlled for refined carbohydrates. It's very hard to say whether or not the health benefits that the investigators claimed were due to the vegetables were due to the vegetables or whether they were due to the fact that the people who were eating more fruits and vegetables were eating less refined carbohydrate. And 10 other positive studies unfortunately manipulated more than one variable. So they didn't just add more vegetables to people's diets. They also happened to reduce sodium or reduce saturated fat or add exercise, et cetera. So it's just hard to tell which part of the diet was or the intervention was responsible for the health benefit. I'm not saying that the vegetables couldn't have been responsible because they could have been. We just can't tell because of the way the studies were designed.
So what she's saying is that there are zero clinical scientific experiments that say that vegetables are good for you. Zero. Goose egg. See that? There's no science that says vegetables are good for you, period. So this video is 10 years old. So I emailed her last month. Hey, Georgia, because I know people. Hey, Georgia, have you redone this search? And she said, yes, I did. And in 2017, she did it again. And still zero scientific clinical experiments that show that vegetables are good for you. All right. Georgia Eid did this scientific experiment in her clinic, 31 inpatient, and they had severe psychiatric problems, schizophrenia, manic depression. There's 31 patients. 100% of them felt better on the ketogenic diet. 100%. You got a patient that's crying? What did they just eat the night before? Did they eat a big fat steak? If you got people that are like emotionally bankrupt because of all of life stresses and they're eating plants, it's probably not good enough for them. They need to eat fat and protein. This guy, Dr. John Ioannidis, he's a meta-researcher. He studies science. He studies professions such as material science, space science, economic science, biochemistry, pharmaceutical science. He studies the professions. And he says that nutritional epidemiology is a scandal. It should just go to the waste bin. I'm not going to go into too much of this slide, but the reason why he can say that is because of the math. The chance of getting truth from epidemiological exploratory study is as low as 1 in 1,000. But the chance of getting a truth from a randomized controlled trial could be as high as 2 to 1. Like you're playing the lottery, you're going to win every time and they're going to double your awards every single time that you play. That's what a randomized controlled trial can do, 2 to 1. Here's some hazard ratios for heart disease. Okay, look at the top, type 2 diabetes, 10.2, that's pretty significant. It should be studied in an experiment. Does type 2 diabetes cause heart disease? What about insulin resistance, 6.4, metabolic syndrome, 6.0, hypertension, 4.5, obesity, 4.3. That's all sugar, causing heart disease. Sugar then, I think, destroys your tissue. The tissue is dying. the bacteria, the organisms, fungus, they eat the dead tissue, they release their chemicals, and it's a whole downward spiral of destruction. So it's more than just eating sugar causing heart disease. It's these invading organisms coming in, dying tissue, and a lot of biofilm, mucus, and chemicals. And then smoking is only at 3.9. And then triglycerides 1.8 and LDL 1.3, not significant. All right, quality of plants. Why are pesticides not banned? Well, when the government looked at spraying poisons on the plants, what they found was 99.99% by weight of the pesticides consumed by the American public are made by the plant. So if you're going to spray a little bit on the plant, so what? You're eating the toxins in the plant. So these plant toxins include phytates, oxalates, cyanide, tannins, salicylates, lectins, nutritional blockers, hormone disruptors, selenine. Selenine is the nightshades chemical. Brussels sprouts have 136 known poisons. Meat is food. Plants are medicine. So there's plants in the cell core line. I sell a lot of herbs. I sell a lot of herbs. Plants are medicine. Your salad is medicine. Meat is food. Plants are medicine. Let's talk about the macronutrients. Protein maintains the structure of your body. Fat and carbs are fuel. I'm changing the way that you think about these macronutrients. I'm a big fan of low carb, but in 2019, I ate a lot of meat and I gained weight. I was in ketosis for that year, most of that year. I was eating a lot of energy. Fat and carbs are energy. To be lean and muscular, eat higher protein and less energy. This website, proteinpercent.com, you see the green section, it says fat loss, and then the red section says fat gain. So if you want to be like a bodybuilder, lean with muscle, you eat the green stuff. That would be like shrimp, chicken, that's whey protein powder at the very top left, that's egg whites. If you want to lose your muscle and you want to put on fat, eat the stuff in the red. That's the flour, sugar, bread, potatoes, milk, cheese, because milk and cheese, that's still energy. I have a patient, I showed her this. She goes, I did Weight Watchers for years and I never lost weight. She goes, I put bread on cheese and I met all my blocks. All my numbers matched up, but I couldn't lose weight. And I showed her this. I was like, you're eating in the red section right there. And if you're happy with your weight, you want to maintain it, ground beef, you can read that yourself. So think of it that way. So you can, and sports nutrition is human nutrition. So if you want to think like a bodybuilder versus a sumo wrestler, you just follow this graph. Go on Protein Percent and play around with that. It's fantastic. All right, here's a bunch of notes. These are expert opinion. And our native diet is obligate carnivore. You have to eat meat. You just have to. And you could do, let's say 90-10, 90% meat, 10% plants. You could do 70% meat, 30% plants. It's totally fine. It's what your body wants. As opposed to the vegan community, which is no meat whatsoever and is pretty militant. The carnivore community is not militant. They're helping you. They want you to do well. So you can get into the carnivore diet and experiment and then come out and then go again into it and then come out. So just keep playing around with it for years. Play around with it for years. Our native metabolic state is fasted and in ketosis. And then when you eat like royalty, like eat a leg of lamb, eat pounds of meat. Our most nutritious foods are liver number 1, red meat number 2, white meat number 3. These are the most nutritious foods on the planet for human beings. It's not blueberries, it's not pecans, it's not even nutritional yeast. It's not asparagus. It's protein, it's meat. Our primary digestive hormone is glucagon. Everybody's an expert in insulin. Where's the experts in glucagon? That's our digestive hormone that we need to be using. And then you can eat fruit, like you have high glucagon, low insulin, you eat fruit to flip that. And that's healthy when you're eating a low carb diet. You can eat fruit once a week or something and your insulin spikes up, that becomes healthy when you're already healthy to begin with. There's no pre and post workout foods or snacking. You just eat 1, 2, or 3 meals a day. Like that, the more often you eat, the worse off your insulin is. Your diet is always an experiment. And this is how food is your medicine. Your food is medicine. Meat is food, plants are medicine. All right, here's more notes. The more meat you eat, the more human you become. Addictions go away. Gambling, porn, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, and medications. You become more, I've seen this now for years. You become more human the more meat that you eat. Emotions get stabilized, super important, especially for kids. The reason why fasting works is because it mimics the carnivore diet. The reason why the ketogenic diet works is because it mimics the carnivore diet. The carnivore diet is the best diet to get rid of parasites. I've had 3 people on the parasite protocol pooping out thousands of worms, and then they go strict carnivore, water, salt, beef. Within 1 to 2 days, the 4-foot mother worm comes out and they're 70% better immediately. So the carnivore diet is the best diet to get parasites out. The most common symptoms, constipation, eat some fruit and iceberg lettuce. Make sure your gallbladder is working well. The goal may be to get on the carnivore diet. You might get on it and in 3 months feel horrible. It took me 6 months to get used to it.